Let's recap on what happened since the last garden tour in autumn 2020.
It's the end of November. The garden isn't as nearly as beautiful, but I'm still getting a decent harvest. Here's a quick look at the garden vista. Let's run through some of the changes in the different areas. I moved 4 garden pots from the tomato patch in front of garden bed 1. I actually like the way it looks and don't mind the smaller walkway. Garden bed 2 is still giving me lots of harvest with some Fort Hook squash, sugar rush peppers, and tomatoes. These 4 aeration pots were placed in for the wildlife area, but naturally the wildgrass isn't having it. But since this is a wonderful sunny spot, I will likely use it again next year when I run out of space in the garden. Here's some cool weather crops I planted from seed in the greenhouse. Broccoli, cauliflower, and some other fun stuff like some turnips and rutabaga. The greenhouse also really needs some organization. It's the end of January and the garden really needs a revamp. All of the warm weather plants need to be pulled out. I injured my foot in late November just enough to have crutches for 5 weeks. Super bummed about the setback from my winter garden. I wasn't able to transplant those little seedlings that I planted in October. The dog also took over the garden as she chased critters. Something's been biting through this. Well, we know the dog's been here. That is a mystery right there. She pounced on anything that moved in the wild grass. I also found her toys all over the garden and asked her to pick them up. It's late February and the garden is starting to show some signs of spring. I planted some mini clover here in early February and I just love the way it looks. My neighbor even told me that it looks like a cottage garden. Yes, please tell me that my garden looks like it's from the Hobbit film. Honestly though, I'm curious to see how the clover rebuilds nitrogen into the soil once it retires. If it can rebuild the soil, I'm going to plant some creeping zinnia or creeping thyme. So this pathway has little flowers blooming along the pathway. Check out the change in this area. I created a tomato alley this year. Last year, I nearly stepped or crawled around other plants to get the fruit. Not this year. And as we walk this way, here's the changes for garden bed 1. I split this area into 2 sections to also get to the harvest easier without stepping on any plants. I actually wanted to make a type of terraced garden, but this will just have to do instead. Garden bed 2 has some plants that survived the 30-degree weather, and there's some beautiful plants over here in the aeration pots area. Some of these also survived the cold weather, and some were transplanted from the October seedlings that were struggling in the greenhouse. The wildlife area needs some updating to make a bridge for the dog, as she has created her own little pathway here. I'll have to think about what I can do to make a bridge here. It's late March and the garden is coming alive. Normally I plant seeds in mid-January, but this year I started them 2 months later. The greenhouse had holes in the roof and there was a delay in repairing it. And since I have electrical cables inside the greenhouse for the heating mat and the grow lights, I just didn't want any water leaking in. I also have been working on seed collections for new gardeners since February. Writing 6 beginner-friendly booklets took a lot of my free time during the weekends. I think it's about time to rename garden bed 1 to Lantern Garden. Currently there's a marshmallow plant and some catnip growing here from last year. Check out garden bed 2. I've added a wooden pathway to easily access the fruit this year. The chamomile is getting larger, and I moved this chard here from the aeration pots. I think it might be time to rename this garden as well. What do you think about deck garden? Let me know if you have better names in the comments. The aeration pots are also doing great, but check out paw crossing for the cat and dog. The cat loves this bridge, and the dog, she uses it to check the tall grass for critters. Well, there's a recap of how the garden is coming along since the last garden tour. Be sure to check back for the April garden tour. Until next time.